The prairie wind carried the scent of death as Eleanor Harrington collapsed into the dust, her once white dress now filthy, her body wasted from weeks of starvation. Her family had made their choice. She would marry the widower Blackwood, or she would perish. Through cracked lips, she whispered a final prayer as the sun set over the homestead. That's when he appeared, a silhouette against the fading light, moving with the grace of a deer. The Lakota warrior's dark eyes held no malice as he knelt beside her broken form. Without a word, he gathered her into strong arms and carried her, away from everything she'd known. Would she find salvation in the arms of a man her people called enemy? Could love bloom in silence between two worlds at war? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. 3 months earlier, the Harrington homestead bustled with activity. Ellaner stood at the kitchen window, watching her father wind his pocket watch with methodical precision. The silver timepiece had belonged to his father before him, a symbol of order, duty, and the unforgiving passage of time. "Ellaner, come. Sit," her mother called, voice gentle but strained. At 19, Ellaner had already declined 2 suitors, much to her father's mounting displeasure. Thomas, her older brother, squeezed her shoulder as she passed. "Best behavior," he whispered. "Father's invited Jeremiah Blackwood for supper." Ellaner froze. "The widower from Green Valley? He's older than father." "He's wealthy," Thomas replied simply, "and father's patience grows thin." When Blackwood arrived that evening, Ellaner felt her stomach tighten. He was 64 at least, with cold eyes that assessed her like livestock at auction. His cane tapped against the floorboards as he approached, extending a wrinkled hand. "Miss Harrington, your beauty was not exaggerated." His smile revealed tobacco-stained teeth. Throughout dinner, Ellaner remained silent while her father and Blackwood discussed crops, expansion opportunities, and finally, her. "Ellaner has a fine hand with needlework and keeps an excellent kitchen," her father boasted. "Educated too, though perhaps too much for her own good." "I appreciate a woman with sense," Blackwood replied, "provided she knows when to exercise it and when to defer." Later, in the parlor, Blackwood presented a velvet box containing a heavy gold ring. "I've been without a wife for 2 years now. My house requires a woman's touch." Ellaner met his gaze directly. "Mr. Blackwood, I'm honored by your attention, but I cannot accept." The room fell silent. Her father's face darkened like approaching thunderclouds. "Ellaner," her mother whispered, "perhaps you might consider—" "I've considered, mother." Ellanor's voice remained steady. "Mr. Blackwood deserves a wife who can offer true affection. I cannot." After Blackwood's departure, her father's rage exploded. "You ungrateful, foolish girl! Do you imagine better offers will come? At your age, most women have 2 children already. I'd rather live as a spinster than with a man who views me as property," Ellaner replied. The back of her father's hand caught her cheek, sending her stumbling against the wall. "You'll accept Blackwood's proposal when he returns next week, or you'll no longer be welcome in this house." That night, locked in her room without supper, Ellaner opened the small drawer where she kept her grandmother's journal. The faded pages contained wisdom from a woman who had crossed the prairies, buried 3 children, and still maintained her spirit. "A woman must know her own heart," her grandmother had written, "for if she betrays it, life becomes a slow death, even in the finest surroundings." The following days brought escalating pressure. Her father invited the pastor to counsel her on Christian duty. Her mother wept and pleaded. Only Thomas offered understanding, slipping food to her when her meals were reduced to enforce compliance. "Blackwood's first wife died under questionable circumstances," he whispered one night. "People say she was frequently bruised, though she claimed to be clumsy." A week passed, then another. Ellaner remained firm despite increasing punishments. First, confinement to her room, then reduced rations. Finally, her father announced to neighbors that she had fallen gravely ill and could receive no visitors. In truth, she was being starved into submission. "This is madness," Thomas argued one night, his voice carrying through the floorboards to Eleanor's room. "You'll kill her with this stubbornness." "Better a grave than a daughter who brings shame to this family," her father replied. "She'll bend before she breaks." But Ellaner, reading her grandmother's words by moonlight, determined she would break before she would bend. By the 3rd week of Eleanor's confinement, hunger had become her constant companion. Her mother occasionally smuggled scraps, a crust of bread tucked into a handkerchief, a small apple hidden in the folds of clean linens, but it was never enough to satisfy the gnawing emptiness. At night, Ellaner would open her grandmother's journal, tracing the faded handwriting with trembling fingers. The leather-bound book had been her grandmother's most precious possession, filled with observations, remedies, and wisdom accumulated over decades on the frontier. "A woman without choices is a woman in chains," one passage read. "Even when all doors appear locked, look for the window that has been left unlatched." Ellaner wondered if her grandmother had ever faced such stark choices: marriage to a cruel man or slow starvation. The thought of Blackwood's tobacco-stained hands on her skin made her stomach heave more violently than the hunger. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. "Ellaner," Pastor Mitchell's voice came through the door. "Your father has asked me to speak with you." The pastor was a thin man with watery eyes that never quite met hers. He sat awkwardly on her bedside chair while her mother hovered in the doorway. "Your father is concerned for your soul, Ellaner. Pride is a deadly sin. The Bible teaches us that a woman must submit." "Does the Bible teach a father to starve his daughter, Pastor?" Ellaner interrupted, her voice hoarse from disuse. The pastor flushed. "Your father assures me you are being provided for. This is merely discipline to correct wayward thinking." "Is it godly for a young woman to be forced to marry a man who beat his first wife?" Ellaner asked. The pastor's eyes widened. "Those are malicious rumors. Mr. Blackwood is a respected member of our community and a generous contributor to the church." Later that evening, Thomas slipped into her room carrying a small piece of cheese and information more valuable than food. "I've made inquiries about Blackwood," he whispered. "His first wife died falling downstairs, but the doctor who attended her had questions. There was a serving girl who disappeared after speaking too freely about bruises, and Blackwood's business dealings are suspect. He's foreclosed on 3 homesteads in the past year." Eleanor's hands trembled as she broke the cheese into tiny pieces, eating each morsel slowly to make it last. "Father won't listen to rumors." "No," Thomas agreed, "but I thought you should know what awaits if you yield." The following day, her father summoned the entire family to Eleanor's room. She struggled to stand, her dress hanging from her thinning frame. Her mother wept silently in the corner while Thomas stood rigid by the window. "This defiance ends today," her father announced, pocket watch in hand as if timing her surrender. "You will either agree to marry Blackwood when he returns next week, or you will be formally disowned and removed from this house." "Where would I go?" Ellaner asked, her voice barely audible. "That is no longer my concern. You are 19, old enough to make your choices and live with them." His voice was cold as January frost. "The community has been told you suffer from brain fever. Your reputation would not survive the truth of your disobedience." That night, her rations were reduced to water only. As moonlight filtered through her window, Ellaner opened her grandmother's journal to a passage she'd read countless times. "I did not survive the crossing of mountains and the burial of my firstborn, to live as a ghost in my own life. Women must sometimes pay dearly for their freedom, but remember, no price is higher than the slow death of the spirit." Ellaner closed the book and pressed it to her heart. She had made her choice. Whatever came next, even death, would be on her terms, not her father's, and certainly not Jeremiah Blackwood's. Blackwood arrived unannounced the following afternoon. the silver head of his cane gleaming in the sunlight as he strode up the path to the Harrington home. Ellaner watched from her window, her heart pounding painfully in her weakened chest. He carried a large package wrapped in brown paper. "Miss Ellaner," her mother whispered, slipping into the room. "Please reconsider. You're so weak now. I fear for you." Her eyes were red-rimmed, her hands constantly wringing her apron. Ellaner turned from the window. "I cannot, Mother. I would rather die." "Don't say such things." Her mother pressed a small piece of biscuit into Ellaner's palm. "Quickly now, before your father comes." Voices drifted up from below, her father's obsequious tone, Blackwood's rumbling replies. Ellaner forced herself to eat slowly, knowing too much too quickly would make her sick. Heavy footsteps on the stairs made her mother scurry to straighten the bed covers. Ellaner tucked the remaining crumbs under her pillow. The door swung open. Blackwood entered first, followed by her father. The widower's gaze travelled over Ellaner's gaunt face and thin shoulders with a smile that made her skin crawl. "Still beautiful, despite your illness," he said, setting his package on the bed. "I've brought your wedding dress, the finest silk from St. Louis." Ellaner stared at the package but made no move to open it. "Aren't you going to thank Mr. Blackwood?" "For his generosity," her father prompted. "Thank you," Ellaner whispered, the words like ashes in her mouth. Blackwood tapped his cane against the floorboards. "I've spoken with the pastor. Given your condition, he's agreed to a private ceremony. Here in 3 days' time." He reached out, his fingers cold against her cheek. "No need to worry about managing my household right away. You'll have time to recover your strength first." That night, Thomas came to say goodbye. "I must leave for Chicago in the morning," he explained, pressing a small amount of money into her hand. "Business, that can't wait. When I return in 2 months, I'll help you, Ellaner. If you're married by then, I'll find a way to get you away from Blackwood." "I won't marry him," Ellaner said, "but I fear I won't be alive when you return." Thomas embraced her, his eyes damp. "You're stronger than you know, little sister." After he left, Ellaner gazed out at the moonlit yard. The house was silent. Her parents had retired early. Summoning what little strength remained, she forced open the window and assessed the distance to the ground. The trellis beside her window would support her weight, if she still had any weight to speak of. Clutching her grandmother's journal and Thomas's money, she carefully climbed out. Her arms trembled as she clung to the wooden lattice, her descent, painfully slow. When her feet finally touched earth, she paused to catch her breath. A sharp pain exploded in her back. Blackwood's cane struck again, catching her across the shoulders and sending her sprawling into the dirt. "Attempting to flee, Miss Harrington?" His voice was eerily calm. "Your father suggested you might try something foolish." Her father appeared in his nightclothes, lantern in hand. "Bring her inside," he ordered, his expression impassive as Blackwood roughly hauled Ellaner to her feet. Instead of returning her to her room, her father led them to the Root Cellar. "Perhaps more secure accommodations will help you reconsider your position," he said, taking her grandmother's journal and Thomas's money from her trembling hands. Ellaner was thrust into the dank darkness, the heavy door bolted behind her. The smell of earth and stored vegetables surrounded her as she collapsed onto the dirt floor. Through a small vent, she could see a sliver of night sky. A single star shone through, bright and unwavering. Ellaner fixed her gaze upon it and made her final decision. Tomorrow, when they came to prepare her for the wedding, she would run. She would get as far from the homestead as possible, even if it killed her. Dawn light filtered through the cellar vent when Ellaner heard her parents' voices upstairs. They were heading to Sunday service, her father insisting on maintaining appearances, while her mother worried about leaving Ellaner alone. "The door is secure," her father reassured, "and she's too weak to attempt anything foolish. We'll speak with Pastor Mitchell about moving the ceremony to tomorrow." Their footsteps receded, followed by the creak of wagon wheels. Ellaner waited until the sound faded completely before examining her prison. The Root Cellar was well stocked but secure, its door reinforced with iron bands. Her only hope was the small delivery hatch used to drop vegetables from the garden. Above, Ellaner stacked empty crates beneath it, her limbs trembling with the effort. The hatch was meant for potatoes, not people, but starvation had rendered her skeletal. With agonizing effort, she squeezed through the opening, tearing her dress and scraping her shoulders raw. The yard was empty. Everyone would be at church for at least 2 hours. Ellaner knew she couldn't follow the road. That would be the first place they'd search. Instead, she headed west across the fields toward the tall grass prairie beyond. Each step was torture. The summer sun beat down mercilessly as she stumbled through wheat fields, her vision swimming. There was no plan beyond escape, just the desperate need to put distance between herself and the homestead. By noon, the last of her strength was failing. The tall grasses of the open prairie concealed her, but offered no shade from the relentless sun. No water, no shelter. Had she escaped marriage only to die of exposure? As the sun began its westward descent, Ellaner collapsed. The tall grasses cushioned her fall, swaying above her like gentle guardians. She could go no further. "Grandmother," she whispered to the vast blue sky, "I tried to be brave." The prairie wind carried her words away. In the distance, the faint outline of her family's homestead was still visible, a reminder of how little ground she had actually covered. They would find her, unless death found her first. Ellaner closed her eyes, surrendering to exhaustion. The rustle of grass nearby barely registered in her consciousness. Perhaps a rabbit or a coyote come to hasten her end. When she forced her eyes open one final time, a face hovered above her, copper-skinned with obsidian eyes that studied her with guarded curiosity. A Lakota warrior, his long black hair adorned with a single eagle feather, knelt beside her. Ellaner had no strength to feel fear. Death by Indian would be quicker than starvation, at least. But there was no malice in the man's steady gaze, only careful assessment. He reached for something at his waist, a decorated pouch made from buffalo hide. Ellaner watched as he opened it, revealing a collection of dried plants and powders. With practiced movements, he mixed several elements with water from a skin, creating a paste that smelled of earth and something sharply medicinal. The warrior hesitated, then gestured toward her cracked lips. Ellaner understood. He was offering medicine, not harm. She nodded weakly. The bitter mixture made her cough, but he supported her head gently until she swallowed. Only then did she notice the scar across his throat, old but significant. Perhaps the reason he had not spoken. As consciousness began to slip away, Ellaner felt strong arms lifting her from the ground. The warrior cradled her against his chest with unexpected tenderness, her head resting against buckskin that smelled of sweet grass and wood smoke. The last thing Ellaner saw before darkness claimed her was the setting sun casting long shadows across the prairie. In her delirium, it seemed the warrior carried her not along the earth, but through the crimson sky itself, away from everything she had ever known, toward an uncertain fate that somehow felt less frightening than the one she'd left behind. Ellaner drifted between fever dreams and moments of clarity. Sometimes she was a child again, playing in the creek behind her grandmother's cabin. Other times she was trapped in the root cellar, pounding against the locked door. Through it all, a steady presence remained, the silent warrior tending to her with patient hands. When she finally awoke fully, the sun was high in a cloudless sky. She lay beneath a small shelter of branches and buffalo hide, constructed to provide shade while allowing the breeze to pass through. Nearby, a small fire sent tendrils of smoke skyward. The warrior sat cross-legged beside the fire, carving something from a piece of wood. He looked up, sensing her gaze, and their eyes met. Ellaner tried to speak, but her throat produced only a dry rasp. He moved immediately, bringing a beautifully crafted wooden cup filled with water. With gentle hands, he supported her head as she drank. The cup was smooth against her lips, decorated with carved symbols she didn't recognize, the first gift from one world to another. "Thank you," she whispered when she could speak. "My name is Ellaner." The warrior nodded, but offered no name in return. He touched his throat where the scar crossed his skin, then shook his head. "You can't speak," Ellaner realized. He confirmed. With a nod, for 3 days they remained at that camp. The warrior prepared broths strengthened with prairie herbs, feeding Ellaner small amounts as her body slowly recovered. He applied poultices to her sunburned skin and the abrasions from her escape through the cellar hatch. Ellaner learned to watch his hands, his expressions. Though he never spoke, his eyes conveyed volumes. Approval when she managed to sit up alone, concern when her strength faltered, quiet humor when she wrinkled her nose at a particularly bitter medicine. On the 4th day, he indicated it was, and time to move. Ellaner stood shakily, clutching the wooden cup he'd given her. Her dress was filthy and torn beyond repair, but the warrior had fashioned a simple garment from a spare piece of buckskin. It was crude by settler standards, but clean and far more practical. "Where are we going?" she asked, though she knew he couldn't answer. He pointed west toward the setting sun, then swept his arm in a wide arc that Ellaner interpreted to mean far away. That was enough. Far away from Blackwood, from her father, from a life not of her choosing. They traveled slowly, the warrior, matching his pace to her weakness. He taught her to drink from streams, cupping her hands the way he did. He showed her which berries were safe, which plants could be eaten. When they rested, he demonstrated simple hand signals: danger, quiet, water, food. Ellaner created signals of her own: thank you, yes, no, tired. He learned these quickly, his eyes crinkling with something like approval. On the 5th day, they heard horses in the distance. The warrior's posture changed instantly, his body alert to danger. With swift efficiency, he concealed their small fire and guided Ellaner into a patch of tall grass. He covered her with a buffalo robe that smelled of smoke and earth, motioning for her to remain completely still. Through a small gap, Ellaner watched a group of men on horseback approach. Her heart nearly stopped. It was her father at the front, Blackwood beside him, and several neighbors making up a search party. They were less than 50 yards away. "Ellaner!" her father's voice carried across the prairie. "If you can hear me, call out. Mr. Blackwood has generously agreed. The wedding can wait until you're recovered." The warrior's hand found hers beneath the buffalo robe, a gentle pressure offering. Reassurance. Ellaner remained silent, watching as the search party conferred, then turned north, away from their hiding place. Only when the riders were dots on the horizon did the warrior remove the covering. Ellaner realized she had made her choice. She had not called out. She was not going back. They journeyed deeper into the prairie, following game trails invisible to Ellaner's untrained eyes. Each day brought new strength to her limbs and color to her cheeks. The warrior whom she had begun to think of as her guardian showed infinite patience, carrying her when exhaustion overwhelmed her recovering body. During a rest near a small creek, Ellaner watched him gather reeds. His fingers worked with practiced precision, weaving and binding. By evening, he had crafted a flute, simple yet elegant. As twilight painted the sky in purples and deep blues, he raised the instrument to his lips. The melody that emerged spoke what his voice could not, haunting notes that seemed to rise from the prairie itself. Ellaner sat transfixed as the music washed over her. It spoke of loneliness, of wind across vast spaces, of something profoundly human yet untamed. When he finished, their eyes met across the small fire. In that moment, Ellaner understood they had shared something more intimate than words could express. "It's beautiful," she whispered. "In all my life, I've never heard anything like it." He offered her the flute. Ellaner shook her head at first, but his encouraging nod convinced her to try. Her first attempts produced only awkward sounds that made them both smile. His hands gently corrected her finger placement, and eventually she managed a few wavering notes. The shared triumph in that small accomplishment felt more significant than any formal introduction. As days melded into one another, Ellaner found herself watching the warrior's movements, the efficient way he started fires, his reverence when gathering plants for medicine, his alertness to every sound and shift in the environment. She began to imitate his careful footsteps, learning to move more quietly through tall grass. One evening, as they sat beneath a vast canopy of stars, the weight of all she had left behind suddenly crashed over Ellaner. Tears came without warning, hot streaks down her face as she curled into herself, sobbing. The warrior watched her from across the fire, his expression unreadable. Then, without ceremony, he began to play his flute. The melody was different this time, gentler, a musical embrace that acknowledged her pain without attempting to diminish it. Ellaner wept freely as the notes surrounded her, offering comfort without intrusion. When her tears finally subsided, she looked up to find him beside her, his hand extended but not touching her, waiting for permission. Ellaner placed her palm against his, a bridge across worlds. His hand was calloused but warm, strong fingers closing gently around hers. They sat that way until the fire burned low, connected by that simple touch beneath the infinite prairie sky. The nightmares came less frequently now. Dreams of Blackwood's tobacco-stained hands and her father's cold dismissal were gradually replaced by images of open spaces and endless horizons. Yet sometimes Ellaner still woke, gasping, disoriented between worlds. During one such night, she jerked awake to find the warrior already alert, his hand on his knife. He signaled for silence, his body tense as he listened to something beyond her perception. After long moments, he relaxed, indicating there was no danger. Rather than returning to his separate sleeping place, he settled beside her, close enough that she could feel his warmth, but not so near as to cause discomfort. His presence anchored her to this new reality, keeping the ghosts of her past at bay. By morning, Ellaner realized she had slept peacefully for the first time in months. When she smiled at him across their breakfast fire, his eyes crinkled in response, a smile that required no words. In this strange new existence, miles from everything familiar, Ellaner discovered something unexpected. Silence could be its own. Language, rich with meaning for those patient enough to learn it. Ellaner's education in survival continued daily. The warrior taught her to move through tall grass without creating waves of movement that could be spotted from a distance. He showed her how to step heel to toe to minimize sound, how to freeze in place when birds suddenly took flight, a warning that others might be nearby. Like this, she whispered, mimicking his crouched walk through a patch of prairie grass. He nodded, adjusting her posture slightly with a gentle touch to her shoulder. The lessons were necessary. Twice more they had spotted search parties in the distance. One morning, the warrior unstrung a small bow he carried and beckoned Ellaner to watch. He demonstrated the proper stance, the way to draw and hold, the moment of release. When he offered the bow to her, her first attempts sent arrows tumbling uselessly to the ground only feet away. But he was patient, repositioning her arms, showing her again and again, until she could hit a tree trunk from 20 paces. The quiet pride in his eyes when she succeeded was worth every frustrating attempt. After a week of practice, the warrior led Ellaner to a rabbit trail and showed her how to set up for a real hunt. Her heart pounded as she drew back the bowstring, focusing on the small brown form nibbling grass 30 feet away. The arrow flew true, striking the rabbit cleanly. "I did it!" Ellaner exclaimed, then covered her mouth, embarrassed by her outburst. But the warrior's eyes crinkled in silent approval. He showed her how to properly dress the animal, wasting nothing, offering prayers of thanks in his language that she couldn't understand, but instinctively respected. That night, as they roasted, her first successful hunt over their fire, Ellaner felt a sense of accomplishment unlike anything from her previous life. She had provided food with her own hands, not by keeping a kitchen or ordering servants, but through skill and patience. Their journey took them through a small settlement the following day. The warrior remained hidden, while Ellaner, wearing her buckskin garment, ventured cautiously toward a clothesline where laundry hung unattended. She took only what they needed, a simple dress and shirt, leaving behind the wooden cup he had carved for her as payment. When she returned to their hiding place, the warrior was studying a paper, nailed to a tree. His expression was unreadable as he handed it to Ellaner. Her breath caught. It was a wanted poster with 2 crude drawings, her face and the warrior's. The text declared that a savage had abducted a settler woman, with a reward offered for her return and the Indians' capture, dead or alive. The poster was signed by Sheriff Mills, but Ellaner recognized Blackwood's influence in the wording. "They're hunting both of us now," she whispered. The warrior nodded grimly, rolling the poster and tucking it into his pouch. That night they traveled under starlight, making no fire. Ellaner noticed the warrior changing their direction frequently, crossing streams to mask their scent from tracking dogs, using rocky ground that would hold no footprints. Near dawn, they heard horses approaching. The warrior pulled Ellaner into a shallow creek bed, pressing her beneath the overhang of the bank. Cold water soaked her newly acquired dress as they lay motionless, barely breathing. Hoofbeats thundered directly overhead. Through a gap in the roots above, Ellaner could see Blackwood himself leading the posse, his silver-headed cane secured to his saddle. "The Indians' tracks lead this way," someone called. "Can't be more than a few hours ahead." Ellaner trembled, not from the cold water, but from fear, not for herself, but for the warrior beside her. If caught, he would receive no justice, no trial. Her eyes met his in the dim light, and she was startled to find him completely calm, his hand covering hers beneath the water. They remained hidden until long after the search party passed. When they finally emerged, soaked and mud-covered, Ellaner realized something fundamental had changed. She was no longer afraid of being found by her people. She was afraid of being separated from his. As the danger of immediate pursuit faded, they established a more permanent camp in a secluded river valley. The warrior chose the location carefully. A small cave with an entrance hidden by brush offered shelter, while the nearby river provided water and fish. One clear night, as they sat beside their small fire, the warrior beckoned Ellaner outside. The sky was awash with stars, more than she had ever noticed from her family's homestead. He led her to a flat area where he had smoothed the dirt and, using a stick, began to draw. First a circle, then dots arranged in patterns. Ellaner recognized the Big Dipper, but the warrior connected the stars differently than she had been taught. With graceful movements, he added lines to show a bear walking across the heavens. He pointed to the constellation, then to himself, touching his chest. "That's your constellation?" Ellaner asked. "The bear." He shook his head, then drew another pattern nearby, a cloud formation. He touched this drawing, then himself again. "Cloud," Ellaner said. "Your name is Cloud." His eyes crinkled with that now familiar smile, nodding. Ellaner took the stick, drawing the European version of the constellation she knew: the Great Bear, Cassiopeia's chair, Orion the Hunter. Cloud watched with fascination as she traced patterns different from his own understanding of the same. Stars. They stayed up late into the night, the dirt around them becoming a canvas of 2 different ways of seeing the same sky. By dawn, Ellaner understood that Cloud had shown her something profound, that the same stars could tell different stories depending on who was looking up at them. In the days that followed, their communication evolved. Cloud taught Ellaner to write in the dirt with symbols that weren't quite pictures but weren't quite writing either. She taught him to spell his name with English letters, which he practiced with meticulous care. One afternoon, Cloud drew a simple star map in the dirt, then pointed to various positions of the sun above it. Ellaner understood he was teaching her to navigate, to find north even on cloudy days when the stars were hidden. He showed her how moss grew on the north side of trees, how certain flowers always faced the morning sun. These weren't merely survival lessons, they were gifts of independence. Cloud wasn't just keeping her alive, he was ensuring she could survive without him, if necessary. As dusk approached one evening, they sat watching clouds drift across the sky, changing colors with the setting sun. Without thinking, Ellaner reached for Cloud's hand, his fingers intertwined with hers naturally, as if they'd held hands 1,000 times before. When she looked at him, the intensity in his dark eyes made her breath catch. She wondered if he could hear her heart pounding in the quiet twilight. Slowly, deliberately, he raised their joined hands and pressed his lips gently to her knuckles, a gesture so tender it brought tears to her eyes. Later that night, Ellaner used a stick to draw in the dirt near their fire. She created simple pictures of her family's homestead, her stern father Blackwood with his cane. She drew herself growing thinner, locked away. She drew her escape and collapse in the prairie. Cloud watched intently, his expression solemn. When she finished, he reached out and smoothed away the images of her father and Blackwood with one decisive sweep of his hand. In their place, he drew a single line connecting the figures of himself and Ellaner, adding a simple rising sun above them. Future, not past. Together, not alone. Ellaner felt something shift inside her, as if a weight she'd carried her entire life had finally been set down. She couldn't articulate it in words, and for the first time she understood the beauty of Cloud's silence. Some truths existed beyond language. When a tear slipped down her cheek, Cloud reached out, his thumb gently wiping it away. His touch lingered, a silent promise in the firelight. A sharp bird call woke Ellaner before dawn. She reached for Cloud, finding his sleeping place empty. The call came again, not a bird, she realized, but a signal. Cloud appeared at the cave entrance, gesturing urgently for her to remain quiet and follow him. Outside, the early morning mist hung low over the valley. Cloud led her through dense underbrush to a small clearing where a man lay bleeding from a gunshot wound to his shoulder. He wore the same style of buckskin clothing as Cloud, his long black hair braided with feathers, another Lakota. The wounded man's eyes widened at the sight of Ellaner, his hand instinctively reaching for his knife despite his weakened state. "Wasikun, a win," he hissed, using a word Ellaner didn't understand, but recognized as hostile from his tone. Cloud made a series of quick hand gestures that seemed to both reassure and silence the injured man. He turned to Ellaner and mimed gathering specific plants he had previously taught her to identify. She nodded, understanding her task, and hurried to collect what they needed. When she returned with the medicinal plants, Cloud had already cleaned the wound with water from his skin. The bullet had passed through the scout's shoulder, leaving a clean but serious injury. Together, they prepared a poultice of crushed herbs mixed with clay. Ellaner held the scout steady while Cloud packed the wound, then bound it with strips, torn from her old dress. The scout watched Ellaner with suspicious eyes throughout the procedure, occasionally speaking to Cloud in their language. Though she couldn't understand the words, the tone was clear. Warning, questioning, disbelief. Once, the scout's wound was treated. Cloud helped him drink water and a bitter tea made from willow bark. As the pain medicine took effect, the scout's expression softened slightly. He studied Ellaner with less hostility, more curiosity. "He thinks I'm your prisoner," Ellaner said to Cloud, understanding suddenly. "He thinks you've captured me." Cloud shook his head, then took her hand in front of the scout, holding it against his heart in a gesture impossible to misinterpret. The scout's eyebrows rose. He spoke again, his tone incredulous. Cloud nodded, then made a series of signs that included pointing to his medicine pouch, to Ellaner, and to the horizon. The scout laughed weakly, then winced at the pain it caused. He looked at Ellaner with new respect, speaking directly to her in halting English. "Mahpia, Cloud, find you, great medicine man. His father great healer before. Now Cloud lead hunting parties, make medicine for sick, speak with spirits." He tapped his own throat, No voice. Spirit journey take voice 3 winters past. Sacred silence. Ellaner glanced at Cloud in surprise. You're a medicine man, a leader. Cloud looked away, suddenly seeming almost embarrassed by the scout's revelations. The scout continued, his English improving as he spoke. White men with guns everywhere now. They say Indians steal white woman, big reward. He reached painfully into his pouch and extracted a bullet, the one that had been removed from his shoulder. This bullet payment for helping search. I wasn't stolen, Ellaner said firmly. I was dying. Cloud saved me. The scout studied her face, seeming to weigh her sincerity. Man named Blackwood lead hunters. Say you his wife. Ellaner's blood ran cold. He lies. I refused to marry him. My family starved me for disobeying. The scout and Cloud exchanged a long look. Finally, the scout nodded, as if accepting her story. You know Cloud not speak, he asked. Yes, Ellaner replied. I know. Vision quest. Mountain alone. 3 days, no water, no food. Spirits show him. The scout searched for words. Show him find woman between worlds, must keep sacred silence until woman hear his heart speak. He looked between them. You this woman. Ellaner felt Cloud's eyes on her, intense and vulnerable. The weight of this revelation, that his silence was a spiritual commitment somehow connected to finding her, left her breathless. I hear him, she whispered, reaching for Cloud's hand. I've always heard him. After 3 days of caring for the wounded scout, who revealed his name was Wanblee, meaning eagle, Cloud indicated it was time to move on. Wanblee was strong enough to travel now, and they had remained in one place too long with militia patrols. Increasing. Summer camp, Wanblee explained to Ellaner as they gathered their few possessions. Many lodges. Cloud's mother there. Safe place. Ellaner's stomach tightened with nervousness. Meeting one wounded scout was very different from entering an entire Lakota camp as an outsider. A white woman in a time of escalating tension between their peoples. They traveled by night, resting in hidden places during daylight hours. On the 3rd day, Cloud led them up a ridge just before dawn. In the valley below, Ellaner saw dozens of teepees arranged in a great circle, smoke rising from morning fires. It was larger than she had imagined, a temporary city of the plains people. You're home, she whispered to Cloud. He nodded, but his eyes held a question as he looked at her. Ellaner understood. He was asking if she was certain she wanted to. Continue. She straightened her shoulders and nodded firmly. Their arrival caused an immediate stir. Children spotted them first, calling out and pointing. Warriors approached with weapons ready until they recognized Cloud and Wanblee. Then came exclamations of welcome, mixed with suspicious glances at Ellaner. She stayed close to Cloud, acutely, aware of being the only white face in a sea of copper ones. An elderly woman pushed through the gathering crowd, her face lighting up at the sight of Cloud. She embraced him fiercely, then stepped back to examine Ellaner with sharp, intelligent eyes. Cloud's hands moved in a series of gestures that seemed to explain Ellaner's presence. The woman listened, then approached Ellaner directly. Though her face was deeply lined with age, her posture remained straight and dignified. She spoke no English, but her actions transcended language as she took Ellaner's hands in her weathered ones, studying the blisters and calluses that had replaced soft, settler skin. Cloud's mother, Wanblee whispered to Ellaner. Tessan Win, white buffalo woman. She is respected healer. Tessan Win led Ellaner through the camp to her teepee. Inside, she presented Ellaner with a carefully folded dress made of soft deerskin, beautifully decorated with dyed porcupine quills in geometric patterns. The older woman gestured for Ellaner to change out of her tattered settler dress. When Ellaner emerged wearing the Lakota garment, a murmur went through the gathered onlookers. The dress transformed her, not into a Lakota woman, but into something between worlds, just as the scout had described Cloud's vision. The following days brought immersion in a way of life Ellaner had only glimpsed during her time alone with Cloud. Women taught her to scrape and prepare hides, to weave baskets, to identify plants for medicine and food. Some were welcoming, others cold and distant, but all watched with curiosity as the white woman worked alongside them without complaint. Cloud's status in the community became increasingly apparent. Though silent, his opinion was sought on important matters. Children followed him adoringly as he treated minor injuries and illnesses. Several times, Ellaner observed him in council with tribal elders, his hands speaking what his voice could not. Each evening, Cloud would find Ellaner and show her something new, how to read weather patterns in cloud formations, which stars guided, seasonal movements, the tracks of animals that told stories of the night's activities. Their shoulders would touch as they sat side by side, their hands occasionally finding each other's in the growing darkness. One evening, a tribal council was called. Though Ellaner couldn't understand the discussion, the tension was palpable. She caught Cloud's name mentioned repeatedly, along with what sounded like her own. Several older men gestured emphatically in her direction, their expressions disapproving. Later, Cloud led Ellaner to a hilltop overlooking the camp. The sun was setting, painting the teepees in golden light. He seemed troubled, his usual serene presence disturbed. "They don't want me here," Ellaner said softly. "They're afraid I'll bring trouble." Cloud didn't deny it. Instead, he took her hand and placed it over his heart, then over hers, a silent declaration that transcended the concerns below. A week into Ellaner's stay at the Lakota camp, riders appeared on the horizon. Not militia or settlers, but traders. 3 men with heavily laden pack horses approached cautiously, raising empty hands to signal peaceful intentions. The tribal leaders, including Cloud, went out to meet them. Ellaner watched from Wind's teepee, understanding this was a delicate exchange. The traders were mixed-blood men who moved between worlds, bringing goods from settler towns to exchange for furs and crafts from the Lakota. The trading proceeded throughout the afternoon. Ellaner kept her distance until one of the traders spotted her, his eyes widening in recognition. "Miss Harrington," he called out, abandoning his haggling over a beaver pelt. "Ellaner Harrington?" Ellaner froze, caught between flight and confrontation. Cloud moved swiftly to her side, his posture protective. The trader approached slowly, pulling a folded paper from inside his coat. "Your brother asked me to watch for you. Said you might be with the Lakota." He extended the letter. "He's been searching since he returned from Chicago." With trembling fingers, Ellaner accepted the letter, recognizing Thomas's handwriting. Cloud watched her carefully as she broke the seal. "Dearest Ellaner, if this finds you, know that father is dead. His heart failed 3 weeks after your disappearance. In his final hours he spoke your name with regret. Before I could return home, Blackwood produced a marriage agreement supposedly signed by father, granting him ownership of our homestead should you become his wife. The document is clearly forged, but without father to contest it, Blackwood has taken possession of our home and lands. Mother now lives effectively as his prisoner, though he calls her his housekeeper. Blackwood leads militia patrols searching for you daily. He claims you were abducted, but I know you would never have fled without desperate cause. If you are alive and receive this, please respond through the bearer. I am staying with friends who can help. Your loving brother Thomas Ellaner read the letter twice, her world tilting on its axis. Her father, dead. Their home, taken. Her mother, captive to Blackwood. The guilt and grief hit her like a physical blow. "My father is dead," she whispered to Cloud. "Blackwood has taken our home. My mother is in danger." Cloud's expression remained steady, but his eyes reflected her pain. He touched the letter, then pointed west towards settler territory, his meaning clear. Was she planning to return? Before Ellaner could answer, the trader spoke again, lowering his voice. "There is more you should know, miss. Blackwood isn't just looking for you. He's been selling rifles to settlers, telling them the Lakota are planning attacks." He glanced at Cloud and he's been giving ammunition to a rival Lakota band, claiming settlers are planning to burn their winter camps. Ellaner translated for Cloud, whose expression darkened. The trader continued, "He's playing both sides. Word is, he's secured government contracts to supply the army if fighting breaks out. He stands to profit handsomely from bloodshed." That evening, an urgent council was called. With one Blee translating, Ellaner shared what she had learned. The revelation of Blackwood's double-dealing caused an uproar among the Lakota leaders. "Blackwood wants war," Ellaner explained. "He's arming both sides, spreading lies to provoke conflict. Many young warriors already angry," one Blee translated, as an elder spoke. "If they learn of these weapons given to our enemies, they will want to attack settlers first." Another elder pointed at Ellaner. "How do we know she does not lie to protect her people?" The council argued late into the night. When they finally emerged, Cloud found Ellaner waiting anxiously outside. One Blee approached them. "Council divided. Some believe, some do not. Some say Cloud's judgment clouded by feelings for white woman." Ellaner looked at Cloud, whose expression was resolute despite the doubt cast on him. "I need to go back," she said. "I need to expose Blackwood and help my mother." Cloud's face revealed his inner conflict, concern for her safety warring with understanding of her obligation. Finally, he nodded and pointed to his chest, then to her. "You'll come with me?" Ellaner asked. His answer was to take her hand, his grip firm and certain. Whatever dangers awaited, they would face them together. Dawn painted the eastern sky as Ellaner and Cloud prepared to leave the Lakota camp. Their departure drew a small gathering, some coming to wish them well, others to witness what many considered Cloud's folly. Partisan Wynne approached Ellaner, her weathered hands holding a small leather pouch decorated with intricate beadwork. She placed it around Eleanor's neck, speaking softly in Lakota. "Protection amulet," one Blee translated, "contains sacred medicines, prayers for safe journey. She says you carry her son's heart, so you carry part of her too." Ellaner embraced the elderly woman, unexpected tears springing to her eyes. "Thank you for your son," she said, knowing Partisan Wynne wouldn't understand the words, but hoping she would feel their meaning. Cloud knelt before his mother, receiving her blessing. When he rose, his face was painted with red and black stripes, not the full war paint of a raiding party, but strategic markings that would help him blend into shadows, become part of the landscape itself. To Eleanor's surprise, Cloud motioned for her to kneel. From a small container made of buffalo horn, he applied similar markings to her face, 2 red lines across her cheekbones, black around her eyes to reduce reflection. "Disguise," one Blee explained. "Too many eyes looking for." White woman and Lakota man. They set out as the sun cleared the horizon, traveling southeast toward settler territory. The journey that had taken weeks during Eleanor's initial recovery would now be accomplished in days. Cloud set a brisk pace, choosing routes that offered concealment, shallow stream beds, stands of cottonwood trees, ravines that cut through the rolling prairie. Each night, Cloud taught Ellaner more survival skills, how to make fire using a bow drill, how to set snares for rabbits, which plants could sustain them if game was scarce. These weren't casual lessons, but urgent preparations, as if he needed to ensure she could survive without him if necessary. On the 3rd night, as they camped in a small grove of trees, Ellaner caught Cloud watching her with an intensity that made her heart quicken. In the firelight, his painted face appeared otherworldly, a bridge between the physical and spiritual realms his people navigated with such ease. "I never thanked you properly," she said softly, "for saving my life that day in the prairie." Cloud tilted his head, his expression questioning. "I know," Ellaner smiled. "Actions matter more than words, but still..." She moved closer to him, gathering her courage. "In my world, we have words for important things. I need to say them, even if you can't." She took his hand, placing it over her heart. "I love you," she said clearly, meeting his eyes directly. "I love you, Cloud." Something shifted in his expression. Surprise, wonder, then a warmth that transformed his features. He took her hand and traced 3 symbols on her palm, then pressed her hand to his heart. "I love you too," Ellaner whispered, understanding his meaning perfectly. Their journey continued through increasingly dangerous territory. Twice they spotted militia patrols and had to hide for hours, once in an abandoned bear den, huddled together in darkness, and once submerged to their necks in a muddy stream, breathing through hollow reeds while horses passed just feet away. Cloud fashioned simple weapons, a knife for Ellaner from sharpened deer antler, a new bow with a full quiver of arrows. He showed her how to use the knife not just for cutting, but for self-defense, his gentle hands positioning her arms in movements that could save her life. As they neared settler lands, they encountered signs of Blackwood's influence. Fresh posters, offering increased rewards, evidence of larger search parties. The danger pressed around them like an advancing storm. On the 6th night, as they made camp on a wooded hillside overlooking a small settler town, Ellaner realized Cloud was preparing for war in his own quiet way. His movements had become more deliberate, his vigilance heightened. When he thought she wasn't watching, his expression revealed a man calculating risks, considering strategies, preparing for confrontation. That night, as they lay side by side beneath the stars, Ellaner reached for Cloud's hand. "Whatever happens," she whispered, "we face it together." In response, Cloud did something he had never done before. He pulled her gently into his arms, cradling her against his chest. Ellaner listened to his heartbeat, steady and strong, speaking what his voice could not. Morning fog shrouded the valley as Ellaner and Cloud descended toward the settlement. Their plan was simple but dangerous. Observe from a distance, gather information about Blackwood's movements, and find a way to contact Thomas without being discovered. They had nearly reached the tree line when Cloud suddenly froze, raising his hand in warning. Ellaner strained to hear what had alerted him. Faint voices carried on the morning breeze, approaching from the east. With swift, silent movements, Cloud led Ellaner to a thicket of chokecherry bushes. They crouched low, barely breathing, as the voices grew clearer. "Told you I saw smoke from a campfire up this way," a man's voice said in English. "Could be trappers," another replied, "or militia, or the girl and her Lakota," a third voice added. "Thomas's sister." Ellaner tensed at the mention of her brother. Cloud's hand found hers, steadying her. The speakers came into view, 3 men moving cautiously through the trees. 2 appeared to be settlers, dressed in buckskins but with European features. The third was unmistakably Lakota, though he wore a mixture of traditional and settler clothing. Cloud studied them intently, then made a decision. He squeezed Ellaner's hand once before stepping from their hiding place, bow ready but not drawn. The 3 men stopped abruptly. For a tense moment, no one moved. Then the Lakota man stepped forward, hands raised in the universal gesture of peace. "Mapia," he said, addressing Cloud. "We seek you and the white woman. Thomas Harrington sends us." Ellaner emerged from the bushes. "You know my brother?" The older of the settler men nodded. "I'm Joseph Miller. This is my son Isaac, and our friend Hehaka." He gestured to the Lakota man. "Thomas has been staying with us since returning from Chicago. We've been searching for you since the trader brought news you were alive." Cloud remained cautious, positioning himself slightly in front of Ellaner. "You can trust them," came a new voice. Thomas stepped from behind a large oak tree, his face breaking into a relieved smile at the sight of his sister. "Thomas!" Ellaner rushed forward, embracing her brother fiercely. "Your letter found me. I came as soon as I could." Thomas held her at arm's length, examining her changed appearance. The buckskin dress, the sun-darkened skin, the confidence in her posture that hadn't been there before. His gaze shifted to Cloud, who remained alert, watching the reunion with guarded eyes. "You must be the one who saved my sister," Thomas said, approaching Cloud slowly. I've heard stories about a silent Lakota warrior and a white woman traveling together. I never imagined—" He extended his hand in the settler gesture of greeting. After a moment's hesitation, Cloud clasped Thomas's forearm in the Lakota manner. Something unspoken passed between the two men, an acknowledgement of their shared concern for Ellaner. "We should move," Joseph said. "This area isn't safe." Blackwood's men patrol regularly. They traveled through the forest to a hidden valley where several log cabins and teepees stood in harmonious proximity, a secret community of those who had chosen a different path from the increasing hostility between their peoples. Inside the largest cabin, Joseph explained their unusual alliance. "Some of us married into Lakota families. Others, like Hehaka, chose to live among settlers. When the troubles started, we withdrew to this place, away from those who would force us to choose sides." An elderly Lakota man entered the cabin, his face lighting with recognition at the sight of Cloud. "Ma Pia, son of Wikasa Wakan." He embraced Cloud warmly. "This is Matto," Joseph explained to Ellaner. He knew Cloud's father, the medicine man. Over a simple meal, they shared what they knew of Blackwood's schemes. Thomas unrolled a crude map on the table. "Blackwood has been buying land surrounding the contested territories," he explained. "He's positioned to claim vast holdings if conflict breaks out and the Lakota are pushed farther west. He's not just profiting from selling weapons," Joseph added. "He's manipulating events to trigger the very conflict that will make him rich in land." Hehaka produced a decorated pipe, filling it with a mixture of tobacco and sacred herbs. "Before we plan," he said in careful English, "we must smoke together. Show Creator our intentions are good." As the pipe passed from hand to hand, settler to Lakota, Ellaner felt a powerful sense of unity. Different peoples joined by a common purpose, just as she and Cloud had bridged their two worlds through love. Dawn broke on a day of planning. Around a rough-hewn table in Joseph Miller's cabin, the unlikely allies gathered. Thomas unrolled a map showing Blackwood's operations, properties acquired, militia patrols, weapon caches, and the routes used to deliver arms to both sides of the brewing conflict. "He's created a web," Thomas explained, tracing lines between settlements and Lakota territories, each strand designed to increase tension. "Our challenge is dismantling it without triggering the very war he wants." Joseph pointed to a circled location. "His main weapons cache is here, in an abandoned mine shaft. He moves smaller supplies to these points," he tapped several marks, "for distribution." Cloud studied the map intently, his expression grave. Ellaner watched him memorizing every detail, his tactical mind assessing vulnerabilities and opportunities. "Mother is here," Ellaner said, indicating the Harrington homestead. "If Blackwood suspects we're working against him, she'll be in danger." Thomas nodded. "We need to draw him away from the homestead while gathering evidence of his double-dealing. The territorial governor has called for peace talks between settler leaders and Lakota chiefs," Joseph added, "scheduled for 3 days from now at Fort Harrison. If Blackwood's schemes are exposed there with both sides present—" "We need proof," Thomas said. "Documents, witnesses, the weapons themselves." Hehaka, who had been silent, spoke up. "I can reach Chief Standing Bear before the council. If he sees evidence of Blackwood's treachery, he will hold back the young warriors who push for war." They divided into teams. Thomas would infiltrate a militia meeting that evening, posing as a concerned settler seeking protection. Hehaka and 2 other Lakota men would journey to inform their tribal leaders. Joseph and his son would investigate the weapons cache. "What about us?" Ellaner asked, looking at Cloud. "You're the one Blackwood wants most," Thomas replied. "You're also our most powerful evidence, a woman he claims to be rescuing, who can testify to his true character and plans." Cloud made a series of emphatic gestures. Thomas looked to Ellaner for translation. "He says, I shouldn't be exposed until—" "The right moment," Ellaner interpreted. "He'll scout the homestead, assess Mother's situation, As the others dispersed to prepare, Cloud led Ellaner to a quiet spot beside the creek that ran through the valley. His expression was troubled as he took her hands in his. "You're worried," Ellaner said softly. Cloud nodded, then traced a finger gently along the line of her jaw, his eyes communicating what words could not: concern for her safety, fear of losing what they had found together. "I understand the risk," Ellaner said, "but I can't hide here in safety while others fight this battle. My mother needs me. Your people need you." She squeezed his hands. "We need to finish this so we can truly begin." That evening, as Thomas departed for the militia meeting, tension hung in the air like the electrical charge before a storm. Ellaner helped prepare supplies, food, medicines, weapons, her mind filled with all the ways their plan could fail. "Your Cloud is a remarkable man," Joseph commented as they worked. "I've known many Lakota over the years. Few would risk what he does. For a woman not of his people, it goes beyond us now," Ellaner replied. "He sees the larger threat Blackwood poses to everyone." Near midnight, Thomas returned with grave news. Blackwood has convinced the militia that a Lakota attack is imminent. They're planning preemptive measures after the Peace Council, assuming it fails, which Blackwood is ensuring it will. The following morning, Cloud departed before sunrise to scout the homestead. Ellaner watched him disappear into the mist, fighting the premonition that they were being swept toward a dangerous culmination. He returned at dusk, his expression grim. Through gestures and drawings, he conveyed what he had seen: militia guards. At the homestead, her mother visible but appearing unwell, Blackwood coming and going with increasing frequency. "He's preparing for something," Thomas translated Cloud's signs. "Moving weapons, gathering men." That night, Joseph's son returned. Alone, breathless and bloodied. "Father's been captured," he gasped. "We found the weapons cache, but Blackwood's men were waiting. They took him to the sheriff, claiming he's a Lakota sympathizer planning to arm the savages." Ellaner and Cloud exchanged a glance, both recognizing that their timeline had just collapsed. Whatever plan they made now would happen under the shadow of immediate threat. "Thomas," Ellaner said, decision crystallizing, "I need to return to the homestead openly. Blackwood wants me. Let him think he's getting his wish." "That's too dangerous," Thomas protested. Ellaner looked at Cloud, whose expression was agonized but resigned. He understood what she didn't say. She was the bait that would draw Blackwood into the open. "Sometimes," Ellaner said, recalling her grandmother's journal, "the path to freedom requires walking directly toward what you fear most." The afternoon. Sun cast long shadows as Ellaner approached her family's homestead alone. She wore her settler dress again, her hair arranged in the style of her former life, though her skin had darkened, and her eyes carried a confidence unknown to the girl who had fled months before. From hidden positions surrounding the property, Cloud, Thomas, and their allies watched. The plan was precarious. Ellaner would engage Blackwood, keeping him distracted while Thomas searched for evidence and Cloud freed her mother. If all went well, they would expose Blackwood at the Peace Council the following day. Ellaner's heart hammered as she walked the familiar path to the front door. Before she could knock, it swung open to reveal Blackwood himself, his eyes widening in shock. "Ellaner Harrington," he breathed, his hand instinctively reaching for the silver-headed cane propped against the wall. "You've returned." "Mr. Blackwood," Ellaner replied, her voice steadier than she felt. "I've come home." He recovered quickly, ushering her inside with exaggerated concern. "My dear, what you've endured. When we found you missing, I feared the worst." "The savages! Did they harm you?" "I've come to discuss terms," Ellaner said, ignoring his question. "I understand you've claimed our property through a marriage agreement." Blackwood studied her with calculating eyes. "Your father's wishes were clear. The document merely formalizes what was already arranged between us. I'm prepared to honor that arrangement," Ellaner lied, forcing herself not to recoil as Blackwood's face lit with triumph. "But first, I must see my mother." "Of course," Blackwood gestured toward the kitchen. She's been unwell with worry. Your return will lift her spirits immeasurably. Ellaner found her mother thin and pale, stirring a pot of stew with mechanical movements. At the sight of her daughter, Mrs. Harrington dropped her spoon with a clatter. "Ellaner, is it truly you?" Her voice was a ghost of its former self. "It's me, Mother." Ellaner embraced her, feeling the frailty in the older woman's frame. Around her mother's finger, she noticed her wedding ring was missing, the gold band her father had placed there 25 years earlier. As they prepared dinner, Ellaner whispered, "We're here to help you. Thomas is alive. Be ready to leave. And tonight—" Her mother's eyes darted fearfully toward the doorway, where Blackwood's shadow occasionally passed. "He has men watching the property," she whispered back. "He keeps my ring in his desk drawer as leverage, says he'll have me arrested for theft if I try to leave." During the tense meal that followed, Ellaner carefully steered the conversation toward Blackwood's business dealings. "I hear there's trouble brewing with the Lakota," she prompted. Blackwood sipped his wine, relaxing as he believed his victory secured. "Inevitable conflict. The savages don't understand progress. Fortunately, I've positioned myself to benefit when hostilities force them farther west." His eyes gleamed with avarice. "The land values alone will triple once they're gone." "And the militia is prepared?" Ellaner asked innocently. "More than prepared." Blackwood chuckled. "I've supplied them myself. Good business, conflict, demands for weapons, supplies, protected transportation, all services I provide at premium rates." Outside, Thomas carefully positioned himself beneath the open study window, recording every damning word. Meanwhile, Cloud moved silently to the cellar doors at the rear of the house. Inside, he found not only food stores but crates of ammunition and rifles, evidence of Blackwood's double dealing. The plan might have succeeded perfectly if not for one of Blackwood's men spotting movement at the study window. The alarm was raised just as Ellaner was leading Blackwood to reveal his arrangement with the rival Lakota band. "We have intruders!" a voice shouted from outside. Blackwood's demeanor transformed instantly. He grabbed Ellaner's arm, his fingers digging painfully into her flesh. "You think me a fool? This is a trap." He dragged her toward his study, retrieving a pistol from his desk. "I suspected you might return with some ill-conceived plan. Your Lakota savage is out there, isn't he?" The sound of struggle erupted outside. Thomas had been captured. Cloud, hearing the commotion, abandoned the cellar evidence to circle back toward the house. "Your scheme ends tonight," Blackwood snarled, pressing the pistol to Ellaner's temple as he forced her onto the porch. "Call him out! Call your savage protector!" Ellaner remained silent, even as Thomas was brought forward, bloodied but defiant. "I'll kill them both," Blackwood announced to the darkness. "Show yourself, Indian!" From the shadows, an arrow flew with deadly accuracy, striking the pistol and sending it spinning from Blackwood's hand. In the moment of confusion, Ellaner drove her elbow into his stomach and broke free. Cloud emerged from the darkness, additional allies materializing from hiding places around the property. Blackwood's men found themselves surrounded by a united force of settlers and Lakota. "It's over, Blackwood," Thomas declared, shaking free of his captors in the confusion. "We have evidence of your weapons deals, your manipulation of both sides. The territorial governor will hear it all tomorrow." Blackwood's face contorted with rage. With surprising speed for his age, he retrieved his silver-headed cane and lunged at Ellaner, the concealed blade within it glinting in the moonlight. Cloud moved with impossible speed, placing himself between Ellaner and Blackwood's blade. The cane struck his shoulder instead of Ellaner's heart, drawing blood but not finding anything vital. In the same fluid motion, Cloud disarmed Blackwood, sending the older man sprawling in the dirt. "The militia will hang all of you!" Blackwood sputtered as Thomas and Joseph's son secured his hands with rope. "You have no authority!" "Actually, they do," came a new voice. Sheriff Mills stepped from the shadows, accompanied by several deputies and, surprisingly, the territorial governor. Himself. We've been watching you for some time, Blackwood. Just needed the evidence. The governor, a stern man with thoughtful eyes, surveyed the scene. Miss Harrington's brother brought concerns to my attention weeks ago. Hard to believe, but we've been monitoring since then. He nodded toward the cellar. Those weapons caches. You've been distributing tell quite a story. As Blackwood was led away, protesting his innocence, Ellaner finally embraced her mother properly. Mrs. Harrington touched Cloud's wounded shoulder with maternal concern. "You saved my daughter," she said simply. "Twice now." The next morning brought a flurry of activity. Thomas recovered their mother's wedding ring from Blackwood's desk, returning it to her finger where it belonged. The militia captain, learning the full extent of Blackwood's manipulations, ordered his men to stand down. The evidence was taken to Fort Harrison, where Lakota leaders had gathered for the peace council. With Blackwood's scheme exposed, both sides recognized how close they had come to being manipulated into unnecessary bloodshed. The peace talks proceeded with new understanding, if not perfect trust. Ellaner tended Cloud's wound as the sun set that evening, their future suddenly wide open before them. The immediate danger had passed, but questions remained. Which world would they choose? Could they truly bridge the gap between their peoples? "You could have been killed," Ellaner whispered as she applied a healing poultice to his shoulder. Cloud reached for a scrap of paper on the table beside them. Using a charcoal stick, he wrote 3 simple words: 2 hearts, 1 path. Ellaner traced the letters with her finger, touched by this new form of communication between them. "You're learning to write English." Cloud nodded, then gestured toward the river that ran behind the homestead. Taking her hand, he led her to the banks, where they had first met months ago. She on the brink of death, he her silent savior. As the setting sun painted the water with golden light, Cloud turned to face Ellaner. His expression was solemn, yet filled with something that made her heart quicken. "My heart speaks what my lips could not." The words came rough and halting, rusty from disuse, but they were unmistakably his voice, deep and resonant, speaking aloud for the first time since Ellaner had known him. Ellaner stared in astonishment. You can speak," Cloud nodded, his hand moving to the scar on his throat. "The vision quest showed me a woman between worlds. I took a vow of silence until I found one who could hear my heart without words." His voice grew stronger with each sentence. "That woman was you, Ellaner." Tears filled her eyes as the significance of his broken silence washed over her. "All this time, the spirit said silence until I found you." He took both her hands in his. "Now my voice returns, but only for you to hear first." Ellaner pressed her forehead against his, overwhelmed by this gift. "I've always heard you, Cloud. Even in silence I heard you." They stood together as twilight deepened around them, no longer divided by language or culture or silence. Whatever challenges awaited them, and there would be many in a world still learning to bridge its divides, they would face them with both hearts and voices united. Later, as they rejoined the others at the homestead, Cloud spoke briefly in Lakota to Hehaka, who smiled broadly at hearing his friend's voice. Then Cloud addressed Thomas and Mrs. Harrington in careful English. His words simple but profound. "I thank you for Ellaner. 2 families now become one." Mrs. Harrington, who had lost so much but found her daughter again, took Cloud's hand in hers. "No, young man, thank you for returning her to us, stronger than she left." 1 year later, spring painted the prairie with wildflowers around a unique dwelling that stood neither fully in settler territory nor on Lakota land, but in the space between. The structure combined the sturdy log walls of a settler cabin with the circular design and central fire pit of a Lakota lodge. Its large windows faced east to greet the morning sun, while a covered porch wrapped around to catch evening breezes from the west. Ellaner stood in the doorway, watching Cloud return from checking his healing herbs in the garden. His voice, once silenced by spiritual vow, now spoke both English and Lakota, though he remained a man of carefully chosen words rather than idle chatter. "The wild mint is strong this year," he reported, placing freshly cut stems in a basket. "Good for the stomach tea your mother needs." Ellaner smiled, her hand resting on her swollen belly. 7 months pregnant, she carried the physical embodiment of their bridge between worlds. Inside their home, Eleanor's mother and Cloud's mother worked side by side, each teaching the other their ways. Patessan Wynne showed Mrs. Harrington how to prepare buffalo meat for winter storage, while Mrs. Harrington demonstrated how to make sourdough bread from her family's starter. The two women had formed an unlikely friendship, communicating through a mixture of gestures, broken phrases, and the universal language of grandmothers-to-be preparing for a new generation. "They argue about which name the baby will speak first," Cloud observed with quiet amusement. "Your mother teaches Lakota words when mine isn't looking. Mine does the same with English." Their home had become more than a dwelling. It was a place of healing and cultural exchange. Settlers came seeking Cloud's medicine and remained to learn about Lakota ways. Lakota families brought crafts to trade and stayed to learn reading and writing from Ellaner. Thomas visited often, now serving as an official liaison between the territorial government and the Lakota leaders. The peace established after Blackwood's arrest remained fragile, but it held, strengthened by small bridges like the one Cloud and Ellaner had built. "The governor approved the formal peace treaty," Thomas announced during his latest visit. "Both sides referenced your story in the negotiations. They're calling it the silence that spoke." Ellaner laughed at the irony. "Our private journey has become a public parable. People need stories of hope," Cloud said simply. "We give them one to hold." That evening, as sunset painted the sky in brilliant oranges and purples, Ellaner and Cloud sat on their porch, watching children play in the yard, a mixture of settler and Lakota youngsters, learning each other's games. Tomorrow, Cloud would teach them all about medicinal plants, while Ellaner would share stories from both traditions. "Did you ever imagine this?" Ellaner asked, leaning against Cloud's shoulder. "When you found me dying in the dust, did your vision show you this future?" Cloud was silent for a moment, his hand covering hers where it rested on her belly. "The vision showed possibility, not certainty," he finally replied. "It showed a bridge that could be built if hearts were brave enough to cross unknown waters." "And were they? Are we?" Ellaner asked. Cloud smiled, his once silent voice now rich with emotion when he spoke to his wife. "We cross the bridge daily, Ellaner. We build it stronger with each crossing." Their child moved beneath their joined hands, a fluttering reminder of futures yet unwritten. As twilight deepened, Cloud spoke softly in Lakota, then translated. "My grandfather had a saying, 'The most powerful medicine comes from plants with roots in different soils.' Our child will have such roots." Ellaner watched the children's game wind down as parents called them home, some to teepees, others to cabins, all part of the extended community that had grown around their example. "What shall we name this bridge builder we're creating?" she asked, not for the first time. Cloud's hand moved gently over her belly. "The name will come when we see the child's eyes. Names are found, not given." As stars appeared in the darkening sky, Ellaner thought of how far she had traveled from that desperate girl starving in her father's house. The journey had nearly killed her, yet had ultimately led to life more abundant than she could have imagined. Cloud seemed to read her thoughts, as he often did. "The path that tests us most leads to the strongest healing," he said, his arm around her shoulders as they watched the moon rise over their shared horizon. "Two hearts," Ellaner whispered. "One path," Cloud finished, his voice no longer silent, but still carrying the profound peace that had first drawn her to him in the endless prairie.